So what they asked us to do was, how can we do a live production for rally? So an American Rally Association event. This happened to be Lake Superior Performance Rally in Marquette, Michigan. And they asked us, you know, this is extreme. There's actually no cellular service, limited cellular service. There's no fiber. There's nothing. So how can we do this live event? So that's what we put together this use case for, and actually it turned out to be pretty good. So next slide, please. Next slide.
You might want to just comment that this was the first time. That an ARA event, American Rally, was actually covered with live streaming. So it was about a 3-hour live stream coming out of the last stage of the event, and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and it turned out to be, you know, their expectations were about 5,000 viewers. We ended up getting 55,000 over the next 2 days. So if we could just start that over and turn up the audio, that'd be great.
This is your Rally 101 primer. Rally events are a test of speed, endurance and perseverance. Held on closed forest roads, a rally consists of competitive timed sections called stages linked together by transits, which are driven on open roads at legal speeds. Teams are sent on the stages one by one against the clock, and the team with the lowest combined time over multiple stages is determined the winner.
The reason we wanted to show that video is, one, so a lot of folks in America understand what rally is. There's a number of stages, and those transits can be up to an hour away. So the different stages / courses can literally be 60, 70 miles from where the service is. And you can see this is in the middle of a forest. And these cars are moving up to 80, 90 miles an hour on some pretty extreme roads. So the idea is, how do you cover that live, and how can you do that? We used a number of different, RF type scenarios. We used CBRS, we used AT&T wireless broadband, we used Starlink,
Yeah, so this was a proof of concept for covering this. So we're going to show you some of the technologies and some of the videos that we captured with that. Scott mentioned that we use CBRS in terms of wireless spectrum for some of the cameras. We used some drone footage. We used RF cameras, just shooting our hosts, doing the interviews with some of the drivers. And we had some wired cameras as well. So we kind of used a lot of different technologies. We also used some Starlink, bonded Starlink, from some of the further away events to bring back some footage in near real time. Captured some clips, did some quick editing, and then put it on air. So we'll go through some of that as we go through the rest of this presentation.
Next slide. This kind of gives you the general idea of what we had set up. We used the AT&T production bus that was provided to us by PSSI, and we used that as our main hub for all of the production. The antenna that you see is our CBRS antenna, and I completely agree, height is definitely key. We had a 13-foot basically camera mount that we had this put on, so we definitely learned that we need to get height. In that area where you have the host stage and this antenna, we were getting about 300 meg up, about 30 meg down. And you see as we start to walk through, as you start going up the mountain, you see the stage there, the course itself, the start line all the way through the finish. That changed in elevation because we're at a ski resort. So, and this kind of goes through that next. We'll just kind of skip through that.
Right, so this was the final stage. There's up to 16 stages, which are 16 short races in a rally. This was the final stage, and this was also the championship event for the season. So we were lucky that this was actually at a ski area, so it was a little bit easier than being in the middle of the woods. We actually had a place to park the bus and to set things up. Yeah, so this is just covering the technologies that we used at various spots along the stage to cover the event. You see at the start line, we had an iPad with a Larix broadcaster streaming. That was used with the CBRS, and what we did is we used a PepLink Wi-Fi connection from the actual camera or on the iPad back to the transmitter, to the CBRS transmitter. So what was mentioned earlier, that trees or leaves or people getting in the way of that antenna can cause outages. So locally, we used Wi-Fi to connect from the streaming device to an antenna that had a clear shot back to the CBRS antenna. And we're going to show you some of that as we go through that. We also used Teradek Ranger 4K RF camera to shoot the host. They were interviewing some of the cars. You'll see that in the video down around the start line. We had about mid-mountain, we had another camera, and then we were using just phone or iPad devices to capture this and just streaming directly from them. And we also, maybe it's in the next slide, but we also used a drone to cover the backside. So one of the challenges, and you can't see it so well in this drawing, but if you look at this, the right lower side of the mountain there was mountain between the antenna at the base of the mountain and where the course was. So that we covered with a drone, so we couldn't get the CBRS signal back there. But we were able to switch between these and have some decent coverage of the actual event. So this is just a quick drawing of the system that we use. Let's see if this is working right. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that there was in American Rally, they have a power stage which gets extra points for the drivers, and that occurred very early in the broadcast. We used a bonded Starlink to get an interview of Travis Pastrana, one of the drivers here, and then we brought that back into the production and quickly edited that and aired it. These were all of the live feeds down here. We had an in-car camera that was using the AT&T mobile network with priority service. You'll see some of that video. And that was actually pretty good. We were able to get decent video throughout the entire course. We used a drone that covered the backside of the mountain. And then we had the CBRS cameras, mid-mountain and start line. That all went into the truck, into a 1080i 59 production switcher. We had to go through converters. Most of this was streamed at either 1080p 30 or 1080p 60. So that had to go through converters before it went into the production switcher. Once through the production switcher, then we went up through the PSSI connection and satellite to Pittsburgh, and then we went onto the GVS network and went out to locations to do the streaming. Also, just to mention on the in-car camera, this did have considerably more delay. This went into the AT&T mobile network and then had to come back through Pittsburgh, back over the satellite link and back into the truck to cut into the other content. So that had a little bit longer delay.
Yeah, one of the other things we learned is that the CBRS needed to ping and continue to ping back and forth, so there was some minimal amount of bandwidth that had to be consistent so that we could tell the FCC that we're basically still there and that the license was still active. So it was splitting that, going back to the regulators, but also then taking it and dropping the production into the truck. So there was a little bit of an art form in that one. So this just gives you an idea of what we've talked about with the height of the antenna. So we had 3 antennas. It was funny, the vendor told us that with 3 antennas it would be 360 degrees. We learned real fast that that was not the case. So we put those in a directional way up the mountain to the start line, and also off to the finish. Unfortunately, we didn't cover the finish. There was actually just a lack of cameras for us to go get the finish. And that's another shot of that as well. So what you'll start to see in the next couple of slides is what the bandwidth was as we started going up the mountain. We ran into issues with not only the trees, but the lift system, etc. So as you started to go into different areas on the mountain up at the top of it, you started to run into issues where we just got into blind spots. So you'll see we were getting 190 down, 12 up. That's another, to your point, key learning is that we need to be able to shift that bandwidth. That bandwidth needs to be the other way around. 190 up and 12 down. So that was a learning that we had, but it was sufficient for what we were doing with respect to, I think we had a 6-camera shoot there, so.
Okay, so we could start this video. You look on the bottom as the video starts, it'll say what the source was as we go through this.
Yeah, so all that stuff, but the cars are just locked down. They can't leave. You can't put them on your trailer.
Yeah, so that's the in-car video.
Park for me is also referred to as impound, which is essentially, yeah, you park your car in there, it's impounded, you don't touch anything until
this
the
is
stewards
Mid-Mountain
review all
over
everything
CBRS.
final. They make sure they don't need to go through your car with a fine-tooth comb and figure out where you were cheating, and then you load it on the trailer. It
And
goes
this
home,
is
sits in the
some of
garage
the drone
for 3 months
footage.
until the next rally, and then you touch it 2 weeks before you leave.
2 weeks before you leave, yeah.
Maybe a week, but depends on who you're talking to.
So you touch it or your mechanic?
Oh, I did that for a long time, and people were like, why have you been rallying for so long? And I'm like, because I won't do it if I have to work on it. It's not that fun. But, honestly, like, that's what's so fun is, like, you do have
Back
guys in
to
the top
live
10,
in
a lot
car.
of whom obviously are competing in teams where you've got crew, you've got mechanics, they've got cars, they fly in.
Yeah, we
the
were
cars
actually
sit there
really stunned at how well the COS worked across the wireless network there, because we lost comms. It was so bad. But within the car, it worked really well.
We can start this one. This is just a walk around
Here is the
showing
AT&T
some
bus.
of the facilities
AT&T
that we had set
business
up.
has partnered with us and Subaru to make this national event live. And so we got a little surprise for you in here. Not only the truck, but we actually do mean some business, guys, right? We got UG working.
On YouTube, and if I put that on Instagram stories.
What's going on with the live stream? Talk about it.
The live stream, well, first of all, brand new technology. I mean, these guys are bringing in a private cellular network, essentially. They've designed just to be able to cover, all the cars going down the stage, and for us to be able to switch to, talking to different competitors.
So these guys have built, telling the entire backstory up to this point brilliantly. We've just kind of been going through everything, making sure that we're all speaking the same language, and we know kind of what the key stories are. But there's not a bad story in the bunch. So
it's very cool. So AT&T Business Solutions has come on board here. Subaru has been a major component to this. Everybody knows UG when they see him out there, right? We're going to have a drone out there. We're going to have a number of cameras fixed on stage. We're going to have some in-car stuff live right here from the mountain, right?
Yeah, we're testing out all the technology and kind of proof of concept this weekend. Playing with toys and seeing what we can figure out.
So I'm excited about it from an ARA perspective. I know these guys are excited about it. Hey, let's future of Rally in America starts now, right, guys?
Absolutely.
Okay. So these are just some shots of some of the activity. We did have a couple days to set up before the event. This was a proof of concept, so we learned a lot. The setup time could be much shorter in the future. But the team got together and cranked through a number of difficulties that you have when you first try to do something.
And I completely agree. We had, as a backup unit, our vendor shipped us, and it came in a 53-foot semi DHL, and the mountain had to go get a forklift to get it off the back of the truck. And that was the backup unit. We never actually cracked it open because we had racked the equipment in the bus. But it's hysterical. This stuff shows up in a shipping crate that took up a good portion. It was 600 pounds, 700 pounds,
Yeah,
I told
yeah.
us. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, I'm glad we didn't have to use it.
Yeah, no, we definitely didn't have to use it. That was good.
So these are just some shots of the team. Like I said, we learned a lot. It was a great experience. We do have one other video that has some other, a few more clips of what we captured using this technology, and that's all we have. So
There was one thing, though, with respect to CBRS, and you talked about it with the licensing and how you get it. It's 2 to 3 months in the U.S. if you're lucky. CBRS was a lot easier to use, such as the Citizens Band radio spectrum. That's one of the reasons we did it, because it's publicly accessible. So it took a day or two for us to basically apply to the FCC, got our license, and we were off and running. And especially in this type of area, it was great. You start getting into one of the restrictions is being by a naval base, or we started to look at it for some other large events, and then there's now congestion of people doing CBRS. So when we start looking at this, this was more designed for the remote or extreme, concerts out in the middle of the desert type deal, or this type of thing with Raleigh, where it's in the middle of nowhere. So, yeah, there's definitely a difference between the two.
You play that? Yeah, so this is just some additional footage. We put together a 2-minute reel. There was like 5,000 or more people at the event, live watching it.
And you'll see at the end of this, there's a slight crash, and the guy, Texas Dave, who's one of the commentators, that was his car, and that's how he ended up being a commentator. So we pulled him in at the last minute.
Here we go.
Yeah, here he is right here. That's when he wrecked. Goes up in flames, actually.
So like this was covered with the RF camera. They were interviewing some of the drivers.
So one thing we found out is that, the customer was extremely happy with the results, and that was really the best learning we got. The owner of the team, the actual Subaru Motorsports team, told us he was getting phone calls from all over the world because it was the first time that U.S. had done live rally streaming, and he said we basically changed the industry. So it's always good when we're able to do something like that. And it was a collaborative effort. There was so many people that came together to pull this off. So. Looks slow. John and I got to drive the stage because we had to go do some RF work, and we drove the stage in a rental car. We're doing about 20 miles an hour, and I thought I was going to die. These guys are doing 80 or 90. It's great. I don't know if the rental car guys appreciated that.
So that's the stuff we picked up over
Starlink.
Yep.
So again, it was just under 4 hours, the stream itself, and the results were 55,000 views within 2 days, and 99% of those views were considered positive. So really the only thing we got was we want to see more of the stages live. So now we just have to figure out how to expand it and zip tie stuff to trees and things. So. And that's it. Any questions? Line's starting.
I have a question. Was there a reason why you chose CBRS over maybe a 5.8 ISM or IIS 3 band?
Yeah, really it came down to what the previous presenter was talking about with respect to licensing and how long it takes and the complications of getting that.
But you could have gotten unlicensed a 5.8.
We could have gotten a license for it, but the issue was that, this gives us the ability to turn these things up very quickly and go to different events without having to go through the complication of doing that. So that's really that was really the reason we did CBRS.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Hi, Rick Ackerman, CBS. Couple things. Terms are thrown around like Wi-Fi, but that can mean many different frequency bands from 2.4 to 5.8, even into the 6 gig band. Also with the 5G, you were talking about having you and the previous presenter have to getting the antennas high. But once again, 5G in the United States can run all the way from the upper 600 megahertz band, which will penetrate a lot of stuff, currently all the way up to the upper 3 gig band, which won't penetrate anything. So I think it's important to point out when you're saying, throwing terms out like 5G, what frequency bands it is. I think since being AT&T, most of their stuff's at but not all their stuff's at higher frequencies. So you're going to have, issues having to get antennas up as opposed to some others who are trying to get deeper coverage using lower frequencies, but your bandwidth is more limited there.
Right, yeah, in this case, we weren't using 5G. So, I mean, we did CBRS, and the actual wireless that we did have was just 4G. It was a 4G antenna on the cell tower that we had, right?
Yep.
4G, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Thank you guys.
Thank you.